Now, why is that? 'Cause I get all of this email about the vegan diet and the China study and Campbell and all this stuff. Can you just set the record straight for me, please?
Well, the easiest way to understand how research is often misled has to do with the amount of time in which you look at something. You know, if you want to take a look at whether or not a certain amount of some liquid is going to be absorbed into a piece of paper, you could probably do that in 10 or 15 minutes, and it's already been absorbed, and it's not doesn't spread out anymore, and it's going to do whatever it's going to do, it's going to do. We're different because we don't live for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. You know, the healthy people are going to live to be 90 to 100. I hope to be as much over 100 as I can get. And more importantly, we've now been able to prove that our diet can alter our genetics, so therefore the next generation can have problems that we cause. And so the only way, therefore, to determine what form of eating — I don't like the word diet because diet is temporary by definition, and we don't want to eat temporary, we want to eat long-term. The only way to determine what form of eating is healthy is by being able to locate, because it would be pretty hard to do this except with short-term animals that don't live too long. With humans, we live a long time. Would be being able to locate some societies. We got a pretty big planet. We got a lot of different methods of eating around this globe. Being able to locate societies which have been eating the same way for at least, and there are arguments about how many generations you'd have to go, but seems to be 4 or 5 generations. So we get people that have been eating the same way for 4 or 5 entire generations, and then we look at their health. Because if somebody says, I turned vegan and it made me healthy, and I'm sure it's a good diet because of that, but 20 years later they're going to get 5 problems because of the vegan diet, so it helped them in one way and hurt them in another, then they don't realize that long-term it didn't do what they thought it was going to do. But if you take a look at somebody where for the last 4 generations before them, they've all been eating the same way, now we have a very good idea. And that's what a couple of people did. Wilhelmer Stephenson did it with the Eskimos. Weston Price did it with over 12 different societies. And he actually thought that he was going to find strict vegetarians being the healthiest. And to his credit,
right?
He did not find that. To his credit as a good researcher, even though what he found was opposite to what he thought, he wrote the book anyway. He found no vegan societies. He found even a couple places where there were some societies that, because of whatever reason, ate a lot less animal meat, and they were way less healthy than the neighboring society, which was eating more animal proteins. So, you know, anytime somebody says, this is healthier than that, I say very simply, we've got a huge planet, huge. If any type of eating really was better, there'll be some society on this planet that's been doing it for the last 5 generations or maybe 50. Find me those societies to validate what you're saying. Otherwise, I'm not interested.
Yeah, we can't find those.
Of course not. They would have died off.
Well, what do you think about the China study? I get email about that at least 2-3 times a week. What do you think about that study?
Well, it's an interesting study. A lot of the things that he says don't correlate to the raw material that he found. So, for example, the China study is the name of the book. However, the China study was also a study. So the book is him writing about those things he feels like telling the public about to make it sound interesting, whereas he's very often not correlating it properly with what he found when he actually did the study. So he'll talk about all proteins being bad, when the only protein he was really looking at very, very diligently was one particular protein in milk called casein. He didn't look at all the other proteins in other societies. He didn't examine any of the ones in other countries that eat the proteins that he says are bad and are healthy in every way you can look at them. He only looked at one major society. There's so many holes in his study that you could drive a train through it.
So he was very selective with his research.
Very selective with his research, which of course is that's one of the problems with research. People look at one thing. I mean, you know that pharmaceutical research, they're looking at one drug to see what it does. And then these same people very, very, very ignorantly decide to research nutrients in the same way they research drugs. So you have a nutrient, and it wouldn't matter which one I mentioned, so I won't even pick one. You have a nutrient which cannot do its job correctly if 9 or 10 or 12 or 15 or 4 or whatever other nutrients are not in adequate supply in the body.
Right.
And you don't test any of those others to see if they're there. And you simply give this nutrient to a bunch of people, and you see, wow, does it work? Does it not work? You can't know that. You can only know that in the population you looked at, and they may have been deficient in other things, showing you it doesn't work, when if they had had enough of the other nutrients, adding this one would have been phenomenal.
It would have worked.
Right.
It may have worked. Interesting.